There is a calculated attack on people that come against the science. You say, oh, our community wouldn't do that. Well, wake up. Your community does it. This community, the scientific community, is cutting off James Tour from scientific funding for my saying exactly what I'm saying now. And you may think yourself so tolerant and so wonderful that you would never do that. But that's exactly what the community is doing. If this film goes out and you post this film and they hear a bunch of scientists sitting around speaking, bad-mouthing their community like this, you're gonna see people rise up and say, the heck with that community. We're gonna vote people in office that are gonna cut out your stinking research funds. There is a distrust of scientists just like us from that community, and it is warranted based on some of the claims that we have made. I feel like a child torn between a mother and father who are getting a divorce. Mm-hmm. I am in both of these communities. Mm-hmm. And I feel that this community is sitting here as if we really know what we're doing, and that other community is all wrong. The reason I think we need to look to ourselves as scientists, we need to look to ourselves. To say it's Ken Ham, it's that community, it's all about them, it's all their problem, and we know what's right, I think is a prescription for disaster. I sit between Christians and Jews all the time, and I love both communities, and I'm from both communities. And it bothers me when one community starts firing at the other and the other at the one. This is exactly what's happening here, I think. We're all sitting around, oh, it's terrible what's happening. One of the reasons for the distrust from that community toward people like us at meetings just like this, where we sit around and act as if we really know stuff and we've got this thing right. I've written 2 articles on origin of life. Nobody has contested the scientific claims. It has nothing to do with God. It's all about life's origin based on the science. On my website, jmtour.com, there's a tab on the right called Personal Topics. You go to Evolution Creation. I cite both of those articles there, and I'm coming out with a 3rd article for a moratorium on origin of life research, because there's so many lies in it. You make a little sort of thing and you extrapolate to the point where we really know where life came from, to the point that everybody thinks scientists know. Scientists are utterly clueless. And because we lie, because scientists lie with their projections, and they have deceived generation after generation, and they've promised delivery based upon this, and nothing has come in 66 years, 2/3 of a century since Miller-Urey. Nothing has come because they're all wrong on this thing. We come out with...
I mean, I said it legitimately.
Yeah.
Make a claim that they're all wrong.
All right, would you let me finish? And then you can answer.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons we know they're all wrong is because it's not leading anywhere. There's nothing that, okay, so because when they say we have made a protocell, we've made a protocell. Well, what is that? That is a lipid bilayer, that is a liposome. To have a cell, you have to have ionic membranes that are going to open that up. You need stuff inside it. You need to have proteins expressed all over this surface. You change the structure of one of them. Just one hexamer of mannose. One mannose hexamer can have over 1 trillion arrangements. Any one of these is wrong, that cell dies. None of this complexity is addressed, and they complain and they suggest they have a path to the origin of life. The projections that they make based on a small result. There is a distrust of scientists just like us from that community, and it is warranted based on some of the claims that we have made. We just heard the rabbi say in 1919, a group of 80 scientists said that they should restrict immigration of a certain types of people. So what do we do today? A group of 80 scientists petition the government and we go, whoa, they must be right. There's 80 scientists. 80 scientists can be very, very wrong about stuff. And we totally dismiss an organization. I can tell you what's happened to me because of my stance based solely upon the science that's been written based on origin of life. There is a calculated attack on people that come against the science. You say, oh, our community wouldn't do that? Well, wake up. Your community does it. I signed a statement in 2001 that says that we are skeptical of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. That came to me in a quick email. I signed that. I said, sure, I can agree with that. And as a result of that, I have been excluded from the National Academy of Science. This is the first time I'm saying it on record. And you say, how do I know? Because when I applied, they said to me, you will never get in the National Academy. I said, I've done as much as people getting in. You know what they said to me? You've done twice as much as people getting in. I have over 650 publications. I have lots of nature, lots of science publications. And I'm not in. Because they have said to me, you will not get in because you signed that statement. Now, I did an exhaustive study talking to geneticists and biologists, explain to me evolution. Now they don't even believe in random mutation and natural selection accounting for the complexity of life. They've switched to neutral drift, which is the change from a parent to a child, and they've switched to universal common descent. I said, well, why don't you then sign that statement with me? It is self-selecting. The National Academy is self-selecting. And so they keep people that are going to bring a contrary view to this. And this is our great society that's, oh, we're right and that other 100 million people are wrong. No doubt. Why they distrust this community? Because we have little gatherings like this. And we come against them as if they're a bunch of blithering idiots. And they're not. I feel like a child torn between a mother and father who are fighting in a divorce here. And I'm like saying, would you guys just get along? If you would understand where they're coming from, if you would tell them the truth, this is what we know. This is our conjecture based on what we know. Rather than saying, this is what we know and that's the way it is, and if you argue with it, you're wrong because 80 scientists agree with this, or 99% of the National Academy. That 1% is old guys who got in there before this was an issue, and as soon as they die off, you will have complete unanimity in the National Academy of Science because the National Academy of Science is self-selecting. So this is what we're doing. This is an exact representation of what the scientific community is, and it's not going to get any better at this rate. I am calling for peace here. I am calling for an understanding here why these people doubt scientists. Why is this? Because we sit around like we in the Northeast in Boston and we really understand this and those idiots in the South don't understand this. Well, they're not stupid. Those Texas oil men have made a lot of money, not because they're stupid. You go out and try to make a lot of money. Go ahead, give it a try. It's not easy. They're not stupid, but when you start projecting, when our community starts projecting that we know something and we are sure of it and we really don't know for sure, then it's a real problem. Some of the same people that were pushing global warming were 30 years ago, I know them, were pushing global cooling. The same people. So, of course, the community is going to have distrust here. What can I believe? You can't just jerk them around like this. You have to say, this is what we know about science, and this is our conjecture based on this. This is not fact. This is a theory of evolution, and there are real problems with evolution. And I listed on my website. I'm not saying that evolution is wrong. I can't prove that. How can I prove evolution is wrong? But what I can say is that you look at Project ENCODE, where they're finding in 98.5% of the human DNA that used to be called junk DNA, which is now called intergenic DNA more accurately, we're finding lots of protein coding genes that build the body that are unique, not in the chimpanzee, but to humans. Same with orphan genes. And at first they said, well, there's only 100 or so of those. Now there's thousands. Every year there's more thousands being added. So you have to account for this. So of course, and I say exactly on my website, you shouldn't stop teaching evolution in school, but maybe what you want to do is teach universal common descent and ENCODE and orphan genes, that they're still building a body of evidence, and there's problems with this. It's not a fact yet. And that's what happens to the community, and you get isolation. And I love both of these communities, and I feel a part. But this community, the scientific community, is cutting off James Tour from scientific funding for my saying exactly what I'm saying now. And you may think yourself so tolerant and so wonderful that you would never do that. But that's exactly what the community is doing. I am coming out and saying, hey guys, there are problems here. Let's not project above what we have, and let's embrace this community. If we would just reach out, and I go into churches and I speak, And I try to reason with them. The scientific community, I say, they don't hate you. They don't hate you. They're not looking to destroy you. This is the sense that they get. And you sit in the community, think about this. If they had heard this conversation, if this film goes out and you post this film and they hear a bunch of scientists sitting around speaking, bad-mouthing their community like this, you're gonna see people rise up and say, the heck with that community. We're gonna vote people in office that are gonna cut out your stinking research funds. You want to treat us like that? We'll cut out your research funds, and that's exactly what they're coming against. It's because of what we say. It's because of what we do that we alienate this community, and they'll vote en masse. And they'll put people in office that don't support us anymore. And we'll be the ones responsible for it because we've shot this thing down. We've shot ourselves in the foot. We're the ones who've done it. Now, to your question, I don't know that they're all wrong. That I misspoke. But what I can say, and in all my articles, I just say, you can't claim this, you can't claim this. You have extrapolated this to the understanding of how you know life has originated when you are not even close. You can't make the nucleic acid. You can't make the chiral carbohydrate. You can't make the chiral proteins. And then you want to have all these things assembled. And so from the chemical side, they're clueless. From the assembly side, there's very few people in the world that know how to build molecules and know how to assemble them into working systems. But by what I mean very few, it's less than about 25 people in the world. I happen to be among that unique group that makes molecules and then assembles them into a functioning system. Both of those are the two areas within origin of life. Both of those systems are so way behind what they have projected. I will have another article, I'd be glad to send you a preprint, where I'm calling for this moratorium, where I spell it out and I show example after example of the claim that was made based on what they found scientifically. So I hope I answered your question.
Fully associate with what Jim just said. And I should mention that I'm also a signatory of that particular petition that got him into trouble. And I've been trying in a more delicate way to make the same points around here. I think that you're using this term evolution in different ways. I mean, he makes the point that I think we can justify if you limit the word evolution to mean common descent. But the word evolution also carries a connotation that, unless you make it very clear what you're talking about, can also mean just evolution by Darwin methods, by natural selection acting on random mutations in which there is no really solid good evidence. And as he points out, the evolutionists themselves have now rejected it. So I think we have to be very careful in using our language, and as Jim said, we have to be very precise as scientists to distinguish between what we are projecting and what we actually know. So I am in full support of what Jim just said.
James, I want to ask you something. You described very well the state of what we know now. But I would like to ask you, without disregarding the communities, just yourself, James Turl, would you change your opinion if there was a proof, if we could emulate, if we could make a cell in the lab? Would it change your mind about the whole issue of the origin of life?
Well, if we could make a cell,
You'll make it.
okay. If we could make a cell in the lab, but you have to qualify. So people have taken a genome that they've built.
Right.
They have a cell. They pull the genome out. They take the one that they made in. I have a Fiat. I take out the engine and I put it into a Ford.
You'll manage to make it from scratch.
Yeah, if they manage to make it from scratch in a way that mimics what would be available on prebiotic Earth. So
Right.
you take hydrogen cyanide, you take formaldehyde, and you build this thing up, yeah, then I would say, hey, you guys have shown this thing. It really starts to look like, hey, these pieces could come together.
Or
And that
still
may-
you'd think that faith is something else and it has nothing to do with the...
No, if these guys have demonstrated this sort of thing, I'd say, hey, you guys really did it. And we might be able to do that in 100 years.
Right.
We might be able to do that. It wouldn't shake my faith in God.
It's
at all.
nothing, exactly.
It wouldn't shake my faith in God because I believe in God because He came to me, He changed my life. I visit with Him each day. There's something there. My interpretation of the Bible is subject to change. My interpretation of science is subject to change. So I would say, hey, this describes how life could have originated. I would be the first to concede that if I saw it. So, and if I saw it, it wouldn't shake my faith at all.
So we still can be open, even though the evidence is lacking, and maybe it's wrong, but maybe it's right. So exactly, your faith does not depend on this being right or wrong.
Right, and it doesn't depend upon my interpretation of the book of Genesis, because every time I talk to another scholar on Genesis, I get different views, because they enlighten me with new things. My faith is not built just upon my interpretation of the book of Genesis. As a believer, my faith is soundly rooted in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. He's risen from the dead. This is what my faith is based on.
So, and when you now let's go back to the community. What do you think will the community of 100 million Americans that you say should be embraced? What will be their reaction if scientists will be able to create life a cell from scratch?
Right, and I think their reaction, if people like me, who they trust, would communicate to them, if I were to say people have made a cell in the lab from starting components that would be available on prebiotic Earth, it looks like this could be a way. I don't think that they would mind at all. You know, they embrace me, even though I am entrenched in the hardcore sciences. They embrace me. They're willing to embrace us. They're willing to come alongside us. I don't think it's going to shake them at all.
It's what they call the story and not the fact, the attitude and not the facts.
Yeah, the attitude.
The facts are not the problem, the attitude is the problem.
And I can talk to a young earth creationist, and I have no problem with them. I have no problem with them. And I say, based on what you see, I don't come against you. To me, that's not a central issue. It's not a central issue at all. If they want to get into science and do that, they'll figure out how to do. These aren't stupid people. This doesn't inhibit my science. This doesn't inhibit your science and your string theory and your multiverses. Tell you, I have a lot of trouble understanding multiverses. I'm not a string theorist. Whether I accept a multiverse or this is the sole universe, I mean, it doesn't affect my science at all. And it doesn't affect how I love you. And that's exactly the way they are. Now, if you were to come against me and say, you know, you're really a dummy if you don't accept multiverses based on what we know about string theory, then I'm going to start resisting you. And you would never say that. You would never say that, but that's what we're doing with 100 million people. And I think there's a lot of commonality between that 100 million and your Orthodox community here in Israel. There's commonality amongst them.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so, because I think that they move to the new state. We'll discuss it later.
Okay.
But I agree with you 100% that your interpretation of Genesis should not affect your faith.
Doesn't affect my faith at all. I'm constantly enlightened on new interpretations. I mean, you taught me things last night about Pharaoh that I never really thought about, that he viewed Moses as coming and doing a bunch of black magic. Why should he succumb to somebody who does black magic in front of him? Why should he say, take my property? I never considered this from Pharaoh's view. I needed this Jewish rabbi to have me consider the Egyptians' view.
There's one point of this is that when people say evolution, that okay, the scientific evidence, if they say that scientific evidence is strong for evolution, that's taken to mean that we have strong evolution for, evidence for how life originated. I mean, is that confusion?
Yes, the two have become conflated. Most scientists don't even know the difference between evolution and origin of life. They are clearly different. One is prebiotic, one is biotic. And even science professors, I had an evolutionary biologist in my university say to me 1 or 2 months ago, Jim, you know, I don't agree with you on any of this stuff that you've just written. Well, the whole article was on origin of life. I said, so you're talking about origin of life, or you're talking about evolution? He had conflated the two. This was even an evolutionary biologist who conflated the two. Most scientists don't even know the difference. They all think it's one and the same. They don't know how far we are in origin of life. Origin of life is in an embryonic stage relative to where evolution is.
So if we just made it more, if we say, okay, there's strong evidence for biological evolution, meaning, afterlife, but
You
are you
have to,
saying?
watch that word, abiotic evolution.
Yeah, what I would say.
No, I was going to go on and say,
Darwinism or directed evolution, that's a huge difference. And,
But it can be inclusive.
It can
Say
be,
more.
but it's never presented that way. It's always
I
presented.
wouldn't say never, I present it.
Well, yes, but that's yes.
well, at least for one step.
Right. So what I say is universal common descent has a lot going for it. If you study that theory, there are a lot of convergent facts going well for universal common descent. But then and that's what I say on my website. I mean, you go ahead, teach universal common descent, but then bring in the problems. The problems for universal common descent are Project ENCODE. This is not a Christian organization. This is a U.S. government-funded effort that's looking at the intergenic DNA, orphan genes, and show that there is not unanimity on this, even among scientists, because I'll tell you, there are other scientists like me that actually agree with me that are afraid to speak up because they've seen what happens to me. And this is silencing of a community. Most organic chemists who really understand what it takes to build a molecule, not biologists never build a molecule. They buy a kit, and most organic chemists actually in the back room, they agree with me. They say, Jim, you're right. We are absolutely clueless on this origin of life stuff. These people, now. They say we're absolutely clueless. We don't understand what these people are saying. And that's what they say in the back room. I sat with a National Academy winner and a Nobel Prize winner. I said, do you understand this? Do you understand this? You know what they said? Nothing. Because when they're together, they won't speak up. They just stared at me. They didn't understand. They just stared at me. But when I get them alone, they tell me, I agree. I was at Weizmann Institute talking with a biophysicist. He was talking about the ear. There's a bar in the ear that vibrates, but the stiffness of that bar changes. The modulus changes as you go along. It's a tremendous feature here that allows us to hear all these tonal differences. And he's describing his research to me. And I said, how do you think something like that evolves? Give me a picture for that, how that would evolve. You know what he said to me? He says, oh, Jim, we all believe evolution, but we have no idea how it happens. This is what they tell me in the back room. This is the confession from the biophysicist at the Weizmann Institute. We all believe in evolution, but we have no idea how it happens. It takes a good Jewish man to express it like this. But this is what I'm saying. So only in private, but in public. When I start challenging people in public, they get very angry with me. As soon as I enter a lecture room, the whole tone of their presentation changes because they're going to be very careful about their extrapolations in front of me. Why should it be that way?
It seems like a problem is when on either side we are seeing lack of knowledge one way or the other and searching for it in the future as God of the gaps. That if we don't understand it, it means that God did it in a way that we want to do to give God credit for it, rather than the holistic view of we will learn how, in some sense, God did it. It's the God of the gaps won't work, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I never speak God of the gaps, and I say in my articles, one day we'll know, one day we may know, but it's far from today.
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that general attitude. It's like that can fit into it,
Of course,
from both sides.
If you believe in God of the gaps, then you shouldn't study because you minimize God. And that's not what Jim is saying.
No, I'm not saying he is. I was saying that sometimes that is.
But is that part of why maybe scientists don't recognize? I mean, you're saying that people are not admitting the gaps, and are they not admitting the gaps because they think that Christians will then, I shouldn't restrict Christians, but that theists or whatever will say now, okay, this is a gap that only God can fill. I mean, are they afraid that their atheist position is getting reduced if there are more gaps?
That's what I'm saying. It can be misused on both sides.
Yeah.
It
is misused on both sides.
Yeah.
But I'd like to kind of applaud what you're saying. I mean, I think that that you're completely right. And I mean, what has happened to Jim is it's very widespread. I mean, even Stephen Jay Gould, as famous as he was, like he didn't believe that gradualistic evolution worked, and he had a punctuated equilibrium model that he proposed instead, and his comments about in which he was critiquing the received wisdom about how Darwinism works and suggesting something else. So his comments critiquing evolution are picked up by the anti-evolutionists and then used to try to attack evolution in general. And
Once again, be careful about this word evolution, because
yeah, I mean, we know what we're talking about. Yeah, we know.
Without doing it with his fingers.
But it's a very highly charged political environment where if you make a comment that anti-evolutionists can use, they will use that, and then you will appear to be on their side. Robert Wright wrote a piece called "The Accidental Creationist" about Stephen Jay Gould. Well, I mean, Stephen Jay Gould was very opposed to creationism, but he didn't think the standard Darwinian picture was right. And I mean, I'm sure that you are called a creationist probably in the circles that are trying to keep you out of the National Academy, when in fact you're not. You're just trying to say, let's not make claims about science that aren't true.
I never said I'm not. I mean,
Yeah.
That's right. You know what the word creationist means, right?
Can I just a second? I think you do make a good point, because I know in UK, global warming, I think in lots of countries, is now regarded as a religion by many people. And so any questioning is regarded as you don't believe it. So, I mean, I know a very eminent scientist in the UK who believes that the world is warming. He believes that carbon dioxide is going up, but he says carbon dioxide is not the main reason for global warming, it's water vapor. And, reducing carbon dioxide will not have any effect on global warming because the water vapor is going up. He's tried to get his paper published. I mean, this man's a fellow of the Royal Society, right, already. Probably wouldn't be now. Right? And he gets rejected by the editors of the journal before it reaches referees, right? Because they regard him as a denier of global warming, which is not. And so there is this sort of fundamentalist view in other areas, including in your area, where it's actually difficult to question.
I'm accomplished.
Yeah.
Global warming denier.
Yeah, okay.
Again, I don't think that humans are responsible for the observed global warming. And I might also mention another distinguished member of our community, Freeman Dyson.
Yes.
Is also equally suspicious of the model. He thinks that the system is just too complex to be able to say what the cause is.
Yes.
Now, I'm even more of a skeptic than Freeman Dyson, because I've looked carefully into the actual data, and I think that it's been manipulated. I don't think I trust the data anymore. I think they're making claims about the data which are not justified. So for this reason, I'm even suspicious of whether we've seen global warming. I tend to believe the satellites more, but they only go back to 1979. And I have a reason for thinking that a bias in favor of faking the data is eliminated from that, mainly because the people who are analyzing the data have no control over the satellite itself.
Right.
Just using publicly available data, which they're then analyzing, and I do know there are two main groups, one of which is I'll call it anthropomorphic global warming skeptic group, and another one which is a pro anthropomorphic.
The bias cancel each other.
Yes, but they get the same results. They completely, that's why I trust it, because you have two different groups with opposite biases, and I know what their biases are, and they get the same answer. Aha! You can probably trust that. Also, I know how the mechanisms work, how the actual data is taken, so I trust it for that reason too.
But for scientists need to be humble, and this is many global warming protagonists are not humble, right? They're quite arrogant people, and there's certain humility which we need to get in, and we need to have open inquiry, which has been closed down with you, and is closed down in many cases with global warming as well.
It doesn't help to say anyone who is a global warming skeptic should be put in prison. No. And there are claims of that on the claims. So I think that Jim's comment, which is, I think, directed to us, I think it's very much to the point. Yes. I mean, we have to very watch ourselves and be very careful in our language and what we mean by these, and say anyone who disagrees with us even slightly with anti-science. I mean, I disagree with my two colleagues here on quantum gravity, but I don't think they're anti-science. I think I'm right, of course, but they have a similar view of their views. And we are all agreed by debate, we'll find out at the end who's right. But probably none of us.
If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email and give me a chance to tell you by Zoom why I believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, the question was, when do I find the best time is to read the Bible? Well, I wake up very early and I read the Bible, and I've actually tried to take the pattern of Daniel. And so I do it 3 times a day. Yeah. And so I've tried to mimic his, we're not on a requirement to do that, but I've tried to follow his pattern. So I rise up quite early. And, when you have children, and I had 4 children, they're all grown and gone now, but I had to get up before them to make sure that I had my own time with the Lord. And then I would always bring a cup of tea to my wife and bring her Bible, and she'd have her time. And then we'd gather as a family and do it every morning. So we would gather at 5:30 in the morning, every morning, and do it as a family. And then I would usually break sometime around midday and go to the chapel on campus and just be able to get on my knees and spend some time with the Lord. And then shortly before bed. But my main reading time was in the morning. And it was much more than just a reading time. It was really a time of meditation, because the scriptures, as I studied the scriptures, I noticed that it does speak of reading the scriptures, but it speaks more often of meditating upon them, which is a slow, contemplative, pensive, and asking God to speak to me. And it's really amazing what happens. I can go into those times in the morning feeling totally defeated, like, oh, how am I ever going to get all this stuff done that I need to get done during the day? And after I'm done meditating on the scriptures and spending some time in prayer, I come out like a roaring lion. I mean, just nothing is standing in my way. He just lifts me up. He speaks to me specific passages according to what I'm going to confront that day. Specific passages. It's like, wow. I mean, just speaks to me through the Word of God. So I feel this tremendous oneness with God in those times. That's the time I will not sacrifice that for anything else. It is the time that I know He's there, and that's what drives me to spend that time with Him. But for me, morning works best. In the evening, sometimes I'm just so exhausted that the quality of the time is not as good. I know other people, they're better in evening times, but yes.
I have 2 questions. You decided to answer one or both. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I know how it's very, very science-heavy, your scientific work, and also very faith-heavy. I know that they're connected, but I like those 2 sides of your presentation. One question is based on your faith life. When you were more involved in Jewish community, I don't know if your family was religious or observant or not, what did you feel was missing for you in that community? It's possible you weren't part of an observant family that you found later on. And the second question is, how do you feel that your faith epiphany of sorts influences or affects your practice of science?
Okay, so for the first one, I came from a quite secular Jewish home, and you're from the U.S. and many Jews can be really quite secular, where there's no difference between them and non-Jews other than they say, I'm Jewish. And that's all I said, I'm Jewish. Yeah, I'm Jewish. Actually, it was so secular that I was never trained against Christianity. I was never heard a negative word in my home about Jesus. So I didn't have that negative presentation to me. So that's what my home life was like. And so I've heard some other people comment, that they say, some people have come against them because they believe certain things. Look, I was shot from both sides. I mean, being a Christian who really loves the Lord, some people come against me and say, oh, he's just a dumb Christian. Well, I had gotten shot from the Jewish side too when I started speaking about this Jesus person. And I didn't even understand that I would get a reaction. I had been so untrained I'd been so untrained about anything about Jesus, when I started mentioning, I remember I walked up to my cousin and I said, I think I've received Jesus. He was like, what? I didn't even understand his reaction. Now you can understand. I mean, and I understand now why he was so shocked. He said, "You're Jewish. How can this be?" So I got shocked from that side too. My faith community, there was very little. I didn't understand rabbis. To me, they were walking around in the synagogue mumbling, and I didn't. They looked like a strange lot of people to me. And I never had any of them stop to talk to me or anything like that. And I remembered even that I'd asked some questions and they just blew me off. So you can see the seeds of that. And it was passed down as well. My father came to the U.S., immigrated to the U.S. at the age of 15. He went to the synagogue on Yom Kippur. He was, both of my parents are from Tehran, from Iranian Jews. He had come, my mother was 12, my father was 15. They weren't married, of course, at that time. And he had come and he went to the synagogue on Yom Kippur and they wouldn't let him in New York City. He says, "I want to go in. Do you have a ticket?" He says, "I don't have a ticket. I'm just a student here." And they wouldn't let him in. And so he bore a resentment from that day that he never voiced it, but you could sense it. And so little things that we do, and I mean, Christians do the same thing. I mean, we hurt a lot of people by the things that we say. Because many Jews ask me that, what is it about the community that made you had to seek out this? What I had a young man opening up the Bible to me and showing me scripture after scripture. That is something I never had from my own Jewish community. I didn't even understand that Jesus was the Messiah on November 7th, 1977. It wasn't until long after that this is the Messiah. And I started putting the whole thing together. Most of what I understand about the Tanakh, I learned through the church. I didn't learn this as a Jew. So my background is not the same as many people, certainly in this room. So the second question about how does my faith affect my science? I pray all the time. Now, I don't pray that my reactions will work for me and not for anybody else, because if people can't reproduce my chemical reactions, I'm in big trouble. So I pray that God gives me creativity. This is my daily prayer. Lord, give me creativity and give my students creativity. Because what distinguishes in my business, what distinguishes a person is not how smart you are, not how high an IQ you have, not what your vocabulary is, how grand it can be. It is how creative you are. When somebody reads one of your papers and they go, "Whoa, I wish I'd have thought of that." Creativity. And I see a man like Bezalel, and I see that God gave that man creativity across many different areas. People say, how do you work in all these different fields? You go from electronic memory to medicine to devices. And I only shared with you half of the companies that we have. How do you do this? I have no idea. It's just that we get in working in a certain area, and I don't let anything inhibit me. I had a student walk up to me, "I want to work on energy devices." I said, this was in 2012 or 2013. I said, that feels so filled. I don't want it. "No, let me do it." I said, "Okay, but if we get into working on energy devices, on batteries, within 2 years, we have to be one of the top groups in the world." Well, how can I say that? I don't know. I just said it. So I put before them these challenges. And, if you empower students, you pray for them, empower them, and I'm a motivational speaker. I'm going to encourage them in this. They start believing it, and they do it. And all of a sudden, so many areas I don't even understand, but my students understand. And I just parrot what they tell me. So this allows me to go to many areas, because I really think a PhD is not what I can teach my students. It's what they can learn and teach me. I'm going to motivate them, and I'm there to facilitate them. And I will say, let's innovate. What can we do? How are we going to build a transistor out of laser-induced graphene on boxes flown across on an assembly line really fast? Do it. "Oh, it can't be done because of this, because there's 5 reasons. You can always give 5 reasons why something won't work. I want to know, what do we have to do to get it to work? As long as we're not violating a law of thermodynamics, we can get it to work." And so, and I make these proclamations, and they happen. But I'm on my knees every morning praying that God gives us creativity. And it's in that I really feel it gives me faith. It also affects how I speak to people. I live my life apologizing to people. Because if I have offended somebody, I have to go back and apologize to them. So if I've spoken harshly to somebody or done, sometimes I tell my wife, I said, I don't walk around with a sign that says, I'm sorry. Because I'm going to hurt somebody today. I know that. But God constantly reminds me, you're different. Jesus said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so if I've said things to offend a person, if I said things to hurt a person in my zeal and my fervor and things, I have to go back. The Holy Spirit touches my heart and says, you're an apology. He expects more from me. So it affects me in that way, how I deal with my fellow person. I tell my accountant, I say, look, if there's any question, pay extra tax. I don't want to be deficient in taxes to the U.S. government because God has so blessed me. And I've seen this over and over again. I've seen what happened. So when I came up with, when computers I got my first computer, it was a Mac SE. It had 1 megabyte of RAM, a great computer. And then I got another computer and I called up Microsoft. I said, can I put this software in that? No, each computer, you can only load it on one computer in those days. And computers didn't talk to each other, so it would never know. So I bought separate sets of software for every computer I was buying from my lab. My colleague came in and he said, what are you doing? You're crazy. I said, no, I called up the companies. They said, it's one computer. I bought them because I knew God was watching me. I knew he was watching me. And then what would happen is, at the end of the year, program managers in Washington would call me and they'd say, we have an extra pot of money. Can you use it? I mean, God just blessed me. I thank Microsoft for being so stingy. It's brought great blessing on me. When we honor God and do according to his word, there is tremendous blessing. That's how it's affected my career and my life. If you're enjoying this series, give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button, and that way you'll hear when we're coming out with new videos. There are no salaried employees in this organization. All the accounting, all the legal work, that's all done by friends of mine. The only thing that I have to pay for is the production work, and if you could help us out with that, I'd appreciate it. There's a link below where you can just click on that and help us in several different ways. Thank you.